is looking at you, kid.
I'm Charles Foster Kane!
Hey, Stella!
Suck on this.
What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. Today we're tackling the 50th anniversary for the U.S. release of the Yakuza, starring Robert Mitchum and Ken Takakura, or Takakura Ken if you're going with the Japanese style. But the movie came out a few years earlier in Japan, but we missed that release date, so we're celebrating the U.S. release date. Before this conversation, I'm joined by the hobo with the high kick himself, Mr. Moose Matson, master voice actor from the world of audio fiction, and the best co-dungeon master any tabletop RPG enthusiast could ever ask for. But with all that out of the way, Moose, it's been a long time. Welcome back. What have you been doing with yourself as of late?
Hello, how you doing, James?
I'm doing well. We missed you last night in the wonderful world of Shadowrun, but interesting things to come next week. Going to get real.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I'm always happy to join you as a co-DM so I can add maybe a little bit of life to some of the narration there for you.
Well, this is something that never occurred to me in decades of playing tabletop RPGs, that having somebody who's a voice actor and does audio fiction there to read the dramatic portions makes the game so much more exciting, and also gives the players a break from my braying like a mule in their ears the whole time, because the DM has to talk a lot. And so I feel like we've come up with the perfect 1-2 punch. And then you create all these crazy videos behind the scenes while we're playing to kind of give like additional commentary when the session's over. So anyway, our crew's been playing now for 4 years plus, and it's been a hoot and a half every step of the way.
Crazy. I'm always afraid when I do those videos, I'll start working on them and I'll be like, oh, what are you guys talking about? I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, your 3-2-1 combat song. I laughed for about a day. Yeah. Well, what is going on in the wonderful world of Savage Realms Monthly? I see you're wearing a Savage Realms t-shirt. I'm wearing my Hobo with the High Kick t-shirt, but what's happening in the world of Savage Realms?
You know, it's all because of being your friend that I'm even doing that, because, you know, hooked me up with...
You give me far too much credit.
Because of you, I got hooked up with Victor Rodriguez, and through him, William, and bingo, next thing you know, William's like, hey, can you be the official narrator for Savage Realms? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And there it goes. There I am.
Well, for people who don't know, if there are new subscribers to this channel, 5 years ago almost, Moose and I got bored of being locked up, and we said, well, let's make a little movie together. And we got Bill Tech involved and Tony Stella involved. And it was one of the situations where we're all like, well, I'll do it if you'll do it. And like, well, I'll do it if you'll do it. And suddenly we assembled a little coalition. And I've got a clip prepared, a little flashback from the wonderful world of Hobo with the High Kick. Yeah, baby. With music selected by Tony Stella. He was our official, I guess, music coordinator or supervisor, and he picked all the tunes. But that was a hell of a lot of fun. We just went out into the streets of New York. Whole city was on lockdown, and we just did it.
Oh, yeah. I'd never been to New York before. Had a blast.
And the best was, because you had to be masked up everywhere in town, your wardrobe was perfect because the hobo was always masked up anyway. So
exactly.
The stars were aligned. Okay. Now, have you done any more audio fiction related to the character of Hobo and kind of continued his adventures?
Well, yeah, on my YouTube channel, my Moose Matson YouTube channel, I've got I had the 4 audio tales that I did, sort of an audio serial. And just the other day, I was going through my pages of notes for ideas and plot points. And I was like, oh, I'm ready to write some more.
Hell yeah. Well, bring it on. Well, I need to go, since you were giving me compliments earlier about getting you into, by an indirect route, into doing audio fiction, I have to give you credit, because I would not have seen the Yakuza if not for you. You gave me the Blu-ray when you were here in New York shooting Hobo, and we didn't watch it at the time. We watched something else with the lovely Anne Margaret, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But I kept seeing you and Tony Stella talking about the Yakuza. And when I saw the 50th anniversary was around the corner, I was like, you know what? It's time to do the deep dive. I think I've seen the movie 4 times, like in the last couple of days, but I'm a relatively fresh convert. But for those people out there who've not seen the Yakuza, once again, released in Japan in December 74, but in America, March 19th, 1975. The movie follows a retired detective who's hired to return to Japan for the first time in decades to rescue his friend's daughter who's been kidnapped by the Yakuza. The plot thickens as he reconnects with the one woman he truly loves and her brother, a retired Yakuza master swordsman who drove them apart years ago. But so here are the stats on who wrote and directed. Written by Paul Schrader and his brother Leonard, with some rewrites by Robert Towne. The movie was directed by Sydney Pollack with an almost exclusively Japanese crew, and it stands alone as one of the coolest genre films of the 1970s. But you tell me, where were you when you first saw it?
I was living in Japan at the time. We were there for 4 years. And we got there, and when you're in Japan, you're an American, you're on base, you've got one channel. So we had our TV, and we're like, oh, we need a VCR. And my mom just started grabbing videos from the video rental place and recording every day. And I don't know why she picked those. I think she just randomly grabbed tapes every day because we're going to record these and keep these. We have hundreds of tapes now. And tape number 26 had the Yakuza on it.
Nice. Well, I told you in advance, I told you a little bit of a fib in advance. I told you that I was only going to prepare really easy, friendly softball questions for this whole recording. However, I told Tony Stella, the legendary poster artist, that we were going to be doing this episode. And it's like, Tony, what's a real deal Yakuza question I could ask Moose to test his love and affection for the Yakuza? Do you think you're ready, Moose, for the Tony Stella challenge? Can I throw a hard one at you to get this conversation started? And then I'll be the icebreaker, and then we can get into the easy stuff.
Hell no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. What if I were to say, what if Tony Stella were to ask the question himself?
Oh, konbanwa o genki desu ka?
Shut up.
Surprise. Man, I heard about this and I was like, there's no better chance for a reunion that will present itself in the next 50 years. So I put on my personal knitwear for the Yakuza. Turtleneck wasn't available, but I'm here to do this together, Moose. Mighty Moose.
I don't even recognize you. Who are you?
Yeah,
I'm surprised you're not wearing a mask.
Yeah, no, well, I will be covered up for sure, but for the sake of the live stream, I'm like, we got to do this face to face. No, but James asked me, and I would actually
art to cover up his thumbnail while recording, so he can maintain his air of mystery.
But the question was real, and I was like, oh, I could do a million things in here, and then where should I go? And then I was like, by the time I was thinking about it, but like, I gotta come on. What am I doing? I mean, this has got to be the chance we finally meet face to face. And as we're both,
now you know why I was so insistent about the start time. I was like, "You're giving me anxiety. Like, where are you?" Because Tony and I've been plotting and scheming this ambush to get him to have the surprise appearance a few minutes into the video. But if you were late, it was going to throw the whole thing out of whack. And so I started getting heart palpitations that there would be a crisis.
And it's like 1 o'clock over here. So I'm a little bit off for the fans that usually listen to the podcast. I'm usually well prepared for these things, but I've been chasing deadlines. So I'm doing this off the back burner end, but I feel our love for the Yakuza will carry us through this one.
Absolutely. Indeed. Well, before Moose, I want to continue with your first impressions of the Yakuza way back in the day. But I feel like for everybody out there who has never had the privilege of seeing this movie before, I had a tough time uploading clips for this movie. But there's one really long clip that I am actually allowed to play on the channel, and that is the original theatrical trailer. So I'm going to let it rip in 3, 2, 1.
The Yakuza, described as the mafia of Japan, but it is more.
My brother spoke of you as the unique stranger. I took it to mean that you were a Westerner who held values consistent with ours. That a man pays his own debts, discharges his own obligations, that they are all that make him a man.
Have you been to the police?
With that story, this is a Yakuza outfit I'm dealing with. What the hell can the police do?
They do a hell of a lot more than I can.
There's one thing you can do they can't.
Really? What?
You can see Tanaka Ken.
The Yakuza, made of clans that kill by a code beyond the law, but it is more.
Now, damn it.
Of course, I'll always...
Always what? Love me? Then marry me.
Farmers in the countryside may watch TV from their tatami mats, and you can't see Fuji through the smog. But don't let it fool you. It's still Japan, and the Japanese are still Japanese.
You still love her?
That has nothing to do with this. I don't understand. What's going on in your mind? You know they're going after you. Do you want to die?
Eiko told you.
What difference does that make? Does she have your permission to go or doesn't she?
Eiko can do as she pleases. She always has.
That's a lie.
The Yakuza lives by the code of samurai chivalry and samurai swords, but it is more.
I love watching you do that.
I'm glad. No, don't! You saw Ken last night.
Yes.
So, can you tell me why he feels he's in some sort of danger?
Did he say that?
No, of course not. You know
Well,
what
damn it, he must have said something. You can't...
But I know him. He feels he's in danger.
All right, Moose, the floor is yours. So take us back.
Mine.
However
Wait,
many years.
Let me catch up quickly. So you were in Japan. You were in Japan when you saw it, right? The first time.
Right.
All right.
I was in what was it, 85. Well, you got there in 84. 85 is when we had the VCRs, the double VCRs, and we were recording movies left and right. And I think I was there when my mom was recording it. So I sat down and she put it on, and I was instantly mesmerized. The music came. I was there from the beginning, so the music came on. It was Dave Grusin's music, and it was just wonderful. I couldn't look away.
And the opening is beautiful because it links us straight to James Bond, all the things we've seen, right? So we have the opening titles, which were originally supposed to be the dyed photographs of the war and kind of telling the story. But we open with a great focus, like we just saw in the trailer, of the actual tattoos on the back, which is straight taken from Seijun Suzuki's Tattooed Life, which presents one of his great Yakuza masterpieces that he shoots for Nikatsu later. And it kind of opens on those tattoos. And it's kind of pre-Bond, or as Bond is happening. And it's kind of recycled here with that beautiful Warner Brothers warm feeling, and you get all the texture and that all sweeping in. And I was going to say, as we're both gaijin in Japan, Moose and I, we are kind of qualified to know this.
Does it mean outsider or stranger? What is
foreigner?
Gaijin?
Yeah,
foreigner. Gotcha.
But as I was, that was my original question before we even get into the movie. Did you ever have run-ins with real Yakuza? Because I did in Kyushu.
No. The closest I would get to was like Bolsos, Bolsozuku in town.
Yeah.
They look real cool, but no real Yakuza.
So you didn't get because you stand out and you could actually handle yourself. Where I had
pinkies are still intact.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny because at the final, I was there on a kind of art scholarship, and at the final show, these guys showed up, and Kyushu was in the southern island in Japan. It's a lot of the economic downturn in the 80s, a lot of Yakuza activity. And they would kind of come and swagger around at the art show, but really lovable, kind of nice guys. And of course, you're a foreigner, so they want to get to know you. And I had a residency as a DJ every Saturday night in this little bar, Iki Bar. And I would DJ funk and stuff. So they would come out and hang out a little bit. You were very intimidating, but you knew they were kind of some guys. And one guy was amazing. I wish I had taken a photograph, or somebody taken a photograph. I had made a giant painting, and there was a tiger in the background, sort of just, I don't know what it was of. And he was mesmerized. He was standing in front of it, actually stripped down, took his shirt off, and showed me like a giant tiger on his back. And he's like, I want to buy it. And I'm like, lucky this worked out. I was very like, I don't know the pricing. What am I going to price these guys? I'm not going to bring it back overseas. So I was like, it's my present to you. And he was like, taking it back. It's like amazing. And so this deal was going to happen. As I roll it up the show, I painted it on this giant truck tarpaulin. So as I rolled it up, all the paint started chipping off and the paint started flaking, and I'm panicking. I'm like, oh no, this is fucking chipping off. And so the whole painting was ruined. I couldn't give it to him as a gift, but he was actually, thank God I didn't say like, 10 grand or something. I would have been here sitting, no fingers back. But yeah, that was my run-in, and it was sort of really kind of, you felt at every moment this could turn, and those were kind of like the new guys and very nice and stuff, but yeah, the presence was definitely menacing and felt at all times.
Well, I think one of the best places we can start is just how rare this is, where a director like Sydney Pollack, who had some success in America with They Shoot Horses, Don't They, Jeremiah Johnson, and The Way We Were, going over to Japan with his production designer, a focus puller, and a camera operator, not obviously a few American actors, but making a movie with a largely Japanese crew, with Japanese resources, and basically paying a fee to Toei, if I'm saying that correctly, for crew and locations and gear and equipment, and making this astonishing movie, which sadly underperformed then and has always been kind of a sleeper cult classic. But today we're going to make the case for it. So I'm going to do my best to interrupt y'all as little as possible, which is probably a foolish promise on my part, but the floor belongs to the two of you. Where should we begin with this movie? Should we just start with the unique stars in the movie?
I would say, like,
any ideas.
I don't know how far you got into this. I saw this first as kind of like the epitome of dad cinema. My dad showed me all these things. James Bond. This is a manly movie for stoic men. And I was going to start with, I can understand its criticism to the movie, and the weak points of the movie are almost at the same time as its strength. It makes it so unique now. But these are things you come to appreciate as you get older in life, as you start to go through things yourself. And it's sort of that journey of these men that we get repeated and over in these traditional Nikio Aiga chivalry films in Japan. You don't really appreciate this as a youngster. You kind of like in love, like Musa, I saw this, you're fascinating, but now it makes you cry. This movie is now touching something deep inside. This is not just a movie anymore. And it makes it even more unique. It makes it even the things that you kind of wish maybe would have been as a youngster, a little bit more action and a little bit less lagging in the scenes, are now the things that you're like, it's kind of amazing they didn't go this Tarantino route, this kind of, we have a great example of another director, John Frankenheimer, doing something called The Challenge in 1982, which is a terrible movie. It stars Toshio Mifune and Scott Glenn, and it's doing all the wrong things. So this is kind of where you weigh it against, and you're like, wow, okay, they really took the time, and at the core, at the heart of it is this family relationship that's getting, and you feel it, and these actors bring with them all that history. So it's kind of a Peckinpah-esque elegy, men out of their time, and it makes it kind of unique, and I appreciate it more and more and more as the time goes by.
Yeah, as I was watching the Blu-ray with Sydney Pollack's commentary, he hasn't seen it at that point like in 25 years, and there are points where he gets sucked into just watching the movie, and at one point he's like, I can't believe how slow this is, how I got away with this at the time, because it would never in a million years would be allowed in the 2000s when he was recording the commentary. But he's just in awe of this. There's like 3 or 4 scenes in a row in the middle, which are crucial to the plot, but there's no action of any kind apart from like the emotional drama of the story. And you can tell he's almost taken aback by the rhythms of the movie. But for me, when the action then gets underway, like here's a brief little snippet. It's all the more impactful because it's been so calm and meditative and intense. And then when the action starts, it's really punctuated. And yeah, I love the approach to violence.
I've heard people talk about it in ways where they're saying it drags on a little bit or it languishes. Some even say, oh, I was a little bit bored in these parts. And I'm like, I try to understand them, but
Fuck
I
them. You
don't
don't understand anything. It's their job
because
to understand the movie, not your job to understand them.
because I deliciously savor every second of this movie. The areas where you might say not too much is happening, certainly no action, it's just dialogue, or even less than that. There's times where people are just looking at each other, but you can see and feel everything that they're doing.
Yeah, I mean,
emotional intensity.
for me, this happens, of course, for especially periods of that time when they're shot so beautiful, and you get to see the old architecture, and you get to time travel in this. You could just have Mitchum walking around, night Tokyo with that saxophone score and a beautiful piano keys. That's it. I can watch that for 3 hours. I don't need any dialogue, and you just see the old buildings pass by,
With the
and we
voice
get
over
Mitch.
narration. That scene
Yeah,
is
we get
so
Mitchum.
sad.
And we get Mitchum, just his acting, his subtlety of him staring at Kilmer House, just the slightest smile. Very few people could pull that off. Only that generation could really pull that off, because he brings to with that lived life. It's not even acting. He's really present in that, and you feel everything that's going on. And so you get to. And each does it in their case, and that's why initially it was going to be Lee Marvin who could have done it, I feel, but there is something about Mitchum in the late 70s where he gets to play Philip Marlowe again. All of a sudden, next year, 75, he's Marlowe.
Philip
all
Lovely.
Of a sudden.
Yeah,
exactly. So we get him in the beginning. We get to he prunes his things, and we see him in Malibu, and we get all that 70s private eye detectives, The Long Goodbye, wafting in. But all of a sudden, we get all our wishes come true, because now we're in Tokyo, and we get to see Ginza, and we get to see parts of Shibuya, and he's sort of remembering as he walks through. And I mean, that's just I can watch 2 hours of that. I don't need any action.
I think I was just saying. I think I was.
You were sending me some great clips earlier, bud.
I think I was predisposed to love this movie because what was it in '83? Before I moved to Japan, I'd come home, and on HBO I'd watch this Philip Marlowe series with Powers Booth on it, and I ate that up. I loved it. I enjoy that slow burn, suspense, noir mindset, and thinking about all the stuff in the Yakuza with it's got everything I love. The Japanese culture, that noir type film and imagery, gangsters with swords, and their rules of honor and stuff, and being 70s, everything I want is in this movie.
Yeah, that's when we get the 70s brings to it this heaviness of re-examine, like we see in Pacapao over and over. We get to re-examine some of those things, and the kind of weaker parts that I already picked out as a kid are this kind of wild-eyed exoticism that the Americans seem to have about, like, Japan is so crazy. Can you imagine you marry somebody's, you go out with somebody's wife, and you're responsible for getting your daughter killed. You feel some kind of like obligation. Isn't that crazy? What kind of crazy Japanese thing? And I'm like, that's universal. What are you talking about? So these themes that they linger on a little bit too much with Giri and Ninjo, it's all right. These are the weakest parts, but in return, it gives us chances for these actors to have these heavier moments where we go, like, even Ken, man, his acting in this is out of this world. People cannot appreciate what he does because there's always a tinge, the resentment towards, obviously, the big secret, which we're going to get to in the end. But even if you watch it again, knowing that, you appreciate his acting so much because they're not equal. And Mitchum does his little thing, minimal, and Ken as well. So they're
almost competing to see who can deliver the more subdued, badass performance,
which doesn't always work. Exactly.
Yeah.
You have those guys like you have Taiga Tanaka and Bond. Again, they are playing off who's cooler at this moment.
Well, that's what's so fascinating about this movie is that you get Mitchum, who's made movies like Out of the Past, quintessential film noir, and he's made movies like Night of the Hunter. He's like the quintessential like American kind of hangdog loner with that sad face. And then you combine that with this total fucking badass, a legitimate like kendo master who's at this point made, I don't know how many brutal tales of chivalry films, but a guy's made a ton of them. And you're bringing these two genres together. But there's also this additional ingredient where the movie is just so fucking sad and emotional as you see Mitchum the only woman that he's ever loved, reminiscing about the time during the occupation right after World War II. And it has so much emotion, and most genre films never even think about possibly including this kind of stuff. And I think it's Robert Towne and Sydney Pollack. They're approaching it more like a drama as opposed to like a down and dirty genre film.
Right. Our friend John Cribbs wrote the comparison between the novel and the screenplay. I haven't gone back to read it on the sites, but it's a really great read, guys. If you ever go on the Pink Smoke, it's breaking it down. I haven't really read the screenplay. I think you did, but I think the story is out there that it has a lot more action. It's a little bit more
Leonard
forceful.
and Paul Schrader were, or at least especially Leonard, they were obsessed with Japanese Yakuza films from the late 60s, and they were just steeped in that. And they wrote a straight up genre film when an American goes back to Japan after being away for about 20 years. And Sydney Pollack, when he came on board, that's when he brought in Robert Towne, and like he respected Paul Schrader, but he's like, a lot of this just isn't working for me as a director. And so but Paul Schrader and his brother sold the screenplay for $300,000 at a time where nobody had ever done that before. And they were first-time screenwriters, which of course leads to Paul Schrader writing Taxi Driver, writing Rolling Thunder, and then launching his own career as a director. But the Paul Schrader cantankerous old man on Facebook, his career begins here with the Yakuza.
Yeah, that's why we have to remember where we meet. I mean, Mitchum comes out of Ryan's Daughter with David Lean in the 70s, super underrated. Then he does Wrath of God, Friends of Eddie Coyle, The Yakuza, Farewell My Lovely. And, what a run. And then same with Schrader. He does The Yakuza, Taxi Driver, Rolling Thunder, Blue Collar. What the hell? Then we get to, Pollack, and he does like 3 Days of the Condor right away, and The Castle Keep, and then, Electric Horseman. And he's just going. Then Ken, like you said, Ken starts in 56 with Toei. He's right away a Toei player. And then his sort of breakout roles, he does early Yakuza films with Kenji Fukusaku, Wolves, Pigs, and Men, really good ones. And then he starts the Abashiri Prison series, which has 17 sequels. 17. Just like, and then for Toei, in the same year, 1965, he does The Brutal Tales of Chivalry, which is the blueprint for the Yakuza. That's the films.
Well, I've got a little taste here from Brutal Tales of Chivalry 9. Yeah, but I'm sorry, I've got a taste of the trailer from number 9 from 1972, just so we know where he is in his career when he enters the Yakuza. So Moose, this clip's for you. And there's a really dope song that comes right after that, but you'll have to go online and look up Brutal Tales of Chivalry 9.
Of course, that's how the films in Japan are promoted. He sells a single, so he sings it right away, and the song is in the movie. And so you have to imagine, in 1966, he hits this stride, and he does 9 films in 66, in 68, 11 films, in 69, 13 films in a year. And these are not... that's insane, and that's why he gets. Oh, and then he does Golgo 13, which we know in 73, and then he slows down in 74. He does about.
I know the guy who did the cover of the Blu-ray. His name might be Tony Stella.
Unfortunate Iranian co-production, but and then in 70s he slows down. He does like 5 movies a year. That's a slow period, right? Like, and as we see him in 74, he brings to this gravitas of just the absolute. He doesn't need to do anything anymore. He's an absolute sword master. That's it. Like, he's done this so many times. And even if you see, I don't know if you guys saw the featurette when you see Pollack direct him, and he gets sort of like idea. The way he just takes it all in. There's zero ego, zero star. He just. I mean, it's just like absolute respect.
The featurette's called Promises to Keep. It's on the Blu-ray, but here are 16 seconds from that featurette.
It's such a strange culture. The more you get to know about it, the more you realize how much you absolutely don't know about it. I mean, like, there's something to me much more horrible about physical violence that has to do with blades than there is when I think about bullets.
But Moose, getting back to Ken, as someone who is a voice actor himself, What is he doing with his voice? Because there's something about his low, subdued, underselling approach to his lines that makes me lean in and hang upon every word. But just from a perspective of a fellow thespian, what is Ken Takakura doing with his whole approach to the character?
He's just being cool. That's all it is.
I guess that sums it up.
It's funny. It's funny you say that because he has this way of. He's one of the coolest actors ever. He can say so much with just a nod, a glance of the eye, and like a slight movement in his mouth, and you know what's going on, or you're like, oh, something's about to happen. But right near the nothing given away, but right near the end, Robert Mitchum comes into his house and he wants to come in, and Ken, he's got his back to the camera, and he's like, of course. And he totally sounds different just in that one line. And it just stands out to me.
Well, obviously his English is not his first, so he speaks very deliberate and slow, but it's very good English. So,
I think it's one of the best performances in English by a Japanese actor I've ever seen, where he had a voice actor or kind of a dialect coach there helping him with the pronunciation of certain words. But Sydney Pollack said when they were auditioning actors, a lot of them really struggled with the English language. English is a weird fucking language unless you grow up speaking it. But and he sells it. He fucking nails it.
In the reverse, we get Keiko Kishi, who's one of the most beautiful women who ever lived, and she starred in everything. She's famously the Snow Woman from Kwaidan, and she's in Her Brother by Kon Ishikawa, one of the most beautiful films ever shot. Ever, bar none. Katsuo Migagawa, he puts silver in the cellular. You will never see another film like this. And so she brings together with this eternal beauty that, again, what she brings, she's an international woman at the time. She married into a French film director. She kind of became an ambassador in France for Japan, and she returned to Japan to do her roles. She does later films, The Fossil with Kobayashi, who's also shot by Okazaki, the same DP that does this. And so she brings that whole life. And her English, you can say, is also very halted, but it fits so perfect because in the movie, she has lived in Japan and she's been struggling. She's been alone. She's been dealing with all this history. And these men keep coming into her life and just fucking everything up. Or in the first case, helping her. But you feel the obligation. And that's really at the core and at the heart. And I only came to understand this obviously much later. As a young kid, you're like kind of like, oh, I guess he's seeing this beautiful girl, but let's get on with it. Like, let's get this. And now
let's talk about obligation, because obligation is something that comes up a lot in the movie. And Moose, you sent me that clip earlier where the character who's Ken's brother says, if you don't feel it, then you don't have it, which is a really interesting perspective. But Moose, what is it about that scene that jumps out to you? Do you feel guilty to wrong Reel and James Hancock? A debt that can never be repaid?
It's God, it's hard for me to say what I feel about that.
Well, I wanted to include the clip where Duncan Idaho, I'm blanking on the name of the actor, and Dusty is asking Ken about Giri. He's like, well, if you don't believe in heaven or hell, or like no one's going to come down on you, like what makes you stick to it? And Ken just says, Giri, don't worry about it. And the way he says, don't worry about it, it's just so cool. It just makes I get the world's biggest smile on my face, because once again, acting in a second language is tricky business. Ken fucking soars in this movie.
Well, not only that, let's go to Bob Mitchum. I say Bob Mitchum because if Bill Scurry was here, he likes to call people by their first name.
Bobby.
Bob Mitchum.
Bobby.
He every time that Bob Mitchum spoke in Japanese, I believed that he knew Japanese and he was saying those lines. It never felt forced or the words sounded weird.
Very true. It felt very lived in, unlike many other examples that are just completely off.
So then I found everybody in that whole movie, I found believable in what they were doing.
Yeah.
Even with that fake mustache and Brian Keith's fake hairpiece.
It's not a fake hair. It's a sweep. He's doing that thing.
Oh, he's a sweep? Are you sure? It's a distinct difference.
Maybe it's a bit of toupee and sweep, but my dad, who was losing his hair in the 70s, he and all his buddies were always debating, do you comb it back and reveal how bald you are, or do you comb it over? But at a certain point, you just go so bald, even the sweep is no longer available to you, which is why I've been shaving it down to the skin since my early 30s, because, if I wanted to have a sweep, it'd have to start here, and go all the way over. But it's not a good look. But in the 70s,
You need to wear those tartan pants to have any authority. I mean, like the way the Americans come in there, because from the opening, from the presentation scene, the Yakuza, the formal greeting that we get.
So cool with the crouch and the open hand, which if you watch the trailers for the early Brutal Tales of Chivalry movies, there are a lot of scenes, like verbatim, those interactions.
Yeah, you have to do it. It's like we get in the Bond film. So as we go back to the Yakuza staples that Paul Schrader outlines, kind of roughly, but nevertheless for the time, great in his film comment piece. We go through these stages that we expect best known in like a Bond movie. We get the seduction scene, we get the M scene, we get the moneypenny scene, and the same goes for the Yakuza, at least the Ninki on Aiga Tohai version of them. They become very repetitive, and we see those scenes over and over again, but we want to see them, and we want to see how each film deals with that scene. But we come to expect, as you showed in the other trailer, the tattoo reveal. Always at the final battle, we get to see what kind of emblem, what god, what animal empowers Ken
like
in
Box
this role.
Goldberg variations. It's 36 variations on the same theme.
Exactly. And so does the opening ritual. We know right away we're in this world, the kind of leftover of the samurai spirit that the Yakuza, here they're very much still in the noble. So the Yakuza sits in a funny place also because it's 74. And by the time in 74 in Japan, we get a completely different genre of Yakuza movies. We already have the Yakuza films that Kinji Fukusaku brings in with Battles
like
of
Graveyards of Honor,
Humanity.
Humanity, and those movies are fucking ruthless.
Jitsuroku Aiga, they're called, and they're called they are tales based on reality of newspaper reports, and these are thugs. These are not noble samurai that do giri and all this stuff. So, and it's also based, of course, student revolution and stuff. So the Yakuza sits in an odd place because it comes 4 years after that explosion happens, where the Japanese audience is already tired of that formula, and Sumiko Fuji, who's the big, super beautiful star of that genre, she does the Red Peony Gambler, she retires, and a lot of guys fell out after that. As these stars find different roles, they were looking for something faster, crazier, drugs, girls, sex, and so that genre, the Yakuza, is it's a beautiful. Not only does Schrader and Leonard and everybody feel they need to make one of those, it's also kind of like an ode, not only in the movie is it the theme of the movie, but I feel it's their internal motivation, whether they know it consciously or not, to make like a goodbye chapter, sort of like the Wild Bunch is a goodbye to the Western. This is very much a goodbye to that period.
Well, when you and I were talking the other day about a conspiracy to surprise Moose with your appearance, you mentioned that there was a surprise crew member that you were going to quiz me on. So the curveball that I should have thrown to Moose, I'll just throw it at myself. I was doing my homework. I was trying to figure it out. Who is the secret crew member that you were referring to who's of such enormous importance?
Kozo Okazaki. I already mentioned him, but this guy is the DP. And this guy brings everything together. So everything you pull on, he's connected. And because he shoots the Yakuza, Goyokin, with Hideo Gosha, who is the Sam Peckinpah of Japan. He's better than Sam Peckinpah, but let's not talk about Lambert.
I've seen about 5 of his movies. My Gosha journey is still ongoing. But we'll have that debate later
He shoots the Citizen Kane of all Yakuza movies, which is The Wolves, which happens in 1971. So if you want to sum up the entire genre in one glorious masterpiece, it's Hideo Gosha 1971, The Wolves, starring, of course, my hero Tetsuya Nakadai, but it has Tetsuro Tamba, it has everyone. That's the masterpiece, and he's the DP for that. And so this kind of takes all these little scenes that we get to throughout and does kind of a shorthand or a long form version of everything. So the best showdown happens is this, and he does shorthand of all that. It's an absolute masterpiece. My number one recommendation, if you want to see the best Yakuza movie of them all, it's The Wolves. But I was going to say, so this is the secret member because he shoots The Challenge for Frankenheimer. An awful film, that has also then the Kyoto International Conference Center that opened in 60s. I did a pilgrimage to that because that's the major architectural struggle where he visits a brother, and that's the final
science fiction movie.
Yeah, it's the best. I want to live there. I
went to Kyoto in 2007, but I did not go to the cultural center. I was hitting all the obvious tourist traps.
Yeah, you have to. I did it just because it was already different. The park is not laid out like that anymore, unfortunately, and you couldn't go into some of the areas that are in the movie. But I was gonna say, like, that's a pivotal scene where he meets the brother, and he really comes home now that he put the burden on Ken, and that it's a big switch in the movie because up to this point he just goes through the thing. I rescued, she's gone. Okay, let's go, bim bam boom, and I connected you guys again. That's my job done.
For people who don't know,
Yep.
Ken feels an obligation to Robert Mitchum's character because when he comes basically back at the end of like 5 years after World War II, he's been on some island. He realizes that a foreigner has been looking after, spoiler warning, 3, 2, 1, last warning. But Mitchum believes that it is her brother who has returned, who is outraged that a foreigner is looking after his sister. But as we learn, it is actually Ken's wife. And so she can't be with Robert Mitchum, but she also can't be with Ken. But Ken still feels enormous obligation to his former enemy, who's been looking after his wife and little girl for all these years. But now, because Bob Mitchum got Ken to come out of retirement and pick up the sword again after 10 years, now he's placed him in an interesting situation where he might be killed by the Yakuza. So it's now Robert Mitchum who has Giri to Ken, which makes this fascinating friendship where they don't really like each other that much for like the first third or half of the movie. But by the end, as they say, like, no man has a better friend, and they say it back and forth to each other. And I get goosebumps the size of grapefruits up and down my arm when they have that scene.
Even those there's little tiny lines, there's whole lines, there's little tiny fragments of a line that mean something that really get to me. And like when he finds out that Ken is no longer in the Yakuza, and he says, I can't ask you to do this. And he's like, you already have. And it's just that little bit, it gets me.
Yeah. It's masterful acting.
It's masterful, and it gets to another gear, what most movies don't. Even a lot of the kind of run-of-the-mill Yakuza films from Japan don't get that. And it takes Pollack, such a smart director. He's a super smart guy. So he knows what he's doing in that scene because he knows
and a damn good actor in his own right, which makes him even better when he's working with actors.
Exactly. So he knows the core has to be something that otherwise the fight doesn't matter in the end if we don't get invested. Now in Japan, they get to do 15 of these movies. So of course you identify, the history, but for a Western audience, you got to put something in there that we can identify, we feel, and brings home to us. We're not just watching exotic swordsmen. And that he does so masterful where it's turned around and now actually Mitchum is like, so what is the solution? And he's like, there's 3 options you can do, right? Like, and one of them, you can kill Tono. And you're like, oh, shit. And Ken has to do it with a sword, but you could do it with a gun. So, it's like, he's using this. It's amazing. And that after that, something unlocks in him. Of course, it doesn't get revealed to him there that Ken feels this. But when usually films that have one of those big reveals, later viewings, it loses something. Here it gains something because now you watch Ken act with that, knowing that, having that in mind, what he does, the pain this man goes through. Later when he gets wounded and Keiko, she's leaning on him and she goes through his hair and you feel just this embrace of this broken, big, lumberous man sitting on the bed and he's hurt. There's such a closeness, and Ken just stands in the doorway. I mean, it breaks your heart. You're like, fuck. And he never, he holds it all in.
Or what about in the bathroom at that club where Ken's confronted by 3 other Yakuza members who are like, look, we want to, somebody's going to pay for the American to be killed. And Ken says, no, he's family. And somebody's going to do it. And he says again, he's family. But at this point, face to face, he and Mitchum are still arguing quite a bit. There's a lot of tension. But what Mitchum doesn't know is that behind the scenes, he's telling other Yakuza members, no, back off. As far as I'm concerned, he's family. You're like, whoa. He looks at him in a completely different light than what he presents to Mitchum face to face.
And Ken does it throughout because Mitchum's like, I feel like you're going to be in trouble. And Ken's like, no, don't worry. It's all going to blow over. You go back to America. Right.
Yeah. And then even in that conversation with him, he's like, it's not your problem. It's not your family. And he's like,
oh, that hurts.
You're right.
Dagger. Oh,
yeah.
That's the dagger. That's so hard. That hits so hard. And he knows. That's the reactions we get from these masters here. We know Ken knows now that he hurt him beyond. That's the wound, right? Usually we get this and he says it to hurt him and cuts away. But Ken went too far. That's what he conveys with that look. He's like, I've now, and the way Mitchum sleeks off, that's the kill. That's the
And
kill.
then immediately after that is that scene you say, James,
Yeah.
when he goes into the bathroom with those guys, and he's like, he's family. He's like, yeah, he's a freaking American. It was like, he's family.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I love that bit when he gets reunited with Hanako for the first time, and she says, "Welcome home." She doesn't say "Welcome back to Japan" or "Great to see you again." She says, "Welcome home."
That
From
whole
her
scene,
point of view, this is where he belongs, which once again is just all these ties, which makes her ultimate fate. I'm getting chills talking about it. Makes her fate all the more impactful.
That's that's for us. That's the Notebook for us men. This scene, I need the Kleenex box ready.
Exactly.
When she's staring at him, she's like, doesn't know who he is, and she's like, Harry Kilmer, and she's got that little bit of a long take, and it's like, welcome home, and it just hits me every time. This is definitely a movie that's on my
manly movies that make
make Moose misty.
And Dave make Moose misty list, and Dave Gershon just hits those piano twinkly keys, and you're like, oh no! It gets me every time. I don't think this
the
time
score is so melancholy. And it's woven throughout the movie so beautifully. But it's one of those movies where what's that German word? Gesamtkunstwerk or whatever it is. Where every component of the film makes it a complete work of art. The photography is extraordinary. The acting is extraordinary. The screenplay is a masterclass. And it's just like every component, every ingredient is really, really strong. And guess what? That's the secret ingredient to making a good movie.
I didn't make a note, but we have to give a big shout out to the costuming, because again, this brings it away from the Yakuza. It's not like the Westerners go into Japan and now everybody's sort of doing the kimono thing. No. Even Ken.
It's jean jackets and leather jackets and shades.
It's very beautiful. That's why I said it's a movie about honor and bloodshed and knitwear. This just has the most beautiful cashmere, and that's why I kind of dressed like this. I felt like this tonight.
But Ken would look cool in like a baggy t-shirt.
Turtleneck. He does.
The leather jackets and shades are totally badass.
But there's a level of sophistication that's not what a hack would do if we're shooting a movie in Japan. This is it's sophisticated, the way everyone's dressed. And the same goes for the bathhouse scene. Now, you could make a real Japanese bathhouse scene which doesn't look like this. This is a Bond set, right? So one of my favorite scenes ever. The way it's lit, the color coding with the koi swimming around in that futuristic,
writhing naked bodies behind the glass.
Yeah, it's like a Sid Mead painting. It feels from Blade Runner. It doesn't even. It's up there. So I think that's you have to point that out. Any hack would have done a Japanese bamboo like I've been to many of those, or just a classic Yakuza where the Yakuza are not allowed. But this is kind of a Bond level set piece. We get a Ken Adam piece in here in the middle, and that's like that scene I could watch over and over again. It's so short, but in my mind it lasts for 30 minutes or something. And
I'd be very happy to wear any of Tanaka Ken's clothes to this day. When he's there in that black jacket, the
shaft,
it reminds me of, if I saw him as Golgo 13, how cool he would look in that outfit doing that. And there's a real neat spot. When he leaves that bathroom later on, it said he's family. He leaves there and he's walking through the street. And right up there on the side of the building, there's a Golgo 13.
Yeah.
It's always on my Twitter. Exactly. And that's the cool thing you see at the time. That whole facade of that building has been changed, but everyone from Japan remembers this place, the pachinko parlor below where he meets the boss. And that was an arcade in the 80s. It was very famous for like big challenges, video game challenges. A lot of things happened there culturally. And then it got changed into a big different department store without the banners hanging down. It has lost all that face. But anybody that has a fond memory of Shinjuku, movie theaters, greedy, grimy Japan, loves this particular building. And when Ken walks by, it's not without that. That was a year before, so it's kind of an awesome nod to.
Go ahead.
Well, Moose, there's a scene I wanted to include, and I kept trying to get it shorter and shorter and shorter, but YouTube kept rejecting it. But I want to give you a chance to comment on the scene, and if you want to quote the scene, you can, where Oliver Wheat talks about how Japan's still there. Do you want to introduce that scene? Where basically Robert Mitchum's like, I don't recognize a thing.
He's back. He's back in Japan, and the meeting coming up for him. Everything that's coming up for him is something that he's been thinking about. He's probably been wanting to be there all this time, and he's finally back. And he's looking around, and Herb Edelman's character goes out there and sees him. What's his name?
I'm going to include the line in the comments section of StreamYard, and that way, if you wish to say it, boom, can you see the alert in StreamYard under private chat?
Oh yeah.
All right, give us a nice read. Give us a dramatic reading.
Well, because he's looking around. He's like, I don't recognize the damn thing. And it's like it's still there. Farmers in the countryside may watch TV from their tatami mats, and you can't see Fuji through the smog. But don't let it fool you. It's still Japan, and the Japanese are still Japanese. Whoop, there goes Dusty with a katana.
I barely touched it. Yeah.
But you're right. Before that, we get this beautiful shot. In my mind, it's always Shibuya because the way it's built up. But we see it from his little tiny backyard, which this house, I want to live in this house.
I love this house.
Set piece, like, oh my God, what a beautiful Bond set piece again. But we see how little of the sky he sees during that beautiful sentence. And we just see a giant building, and I think it's Shibuya. But it's so built up, and you can't see a sky from where he was. But so it fits again with that theme of these three people that don't want to adapt to the time, that are lingering in the past, that are catching up to themselves, trying to make sense of what happened, because each one is hiding in their way. And when they finally come together, it's so tragic. It's not like this big reunion. It's they're forced to confront the past and really violently deal with it. And it goes double and triple later with like the son. I've killed your eldest son. It goes so wild because the brother's son gets involved. And Ken has a choice to make at that point. And it's a quick cut in his mind. It's well handled.
When he gets attacked by his nephew in that battle, and he sees the tattoo, and you see him hesitate, but then he doesn't hesitate for long.
He sees his daughter for a second.
Yeah, but it's like that's hardcore as shit. Dude.
Yeah.
But I love that battle scene. He does something which, if you watch, I can't remember if it's in the behind the scenes featurette or the commentary, but how Sydney Pollack wanted to have those fake outs in the movie where he would kind of look away to bait people to attack, and then he would attack. And there was a kendo master on the set who was like, "Oh no, you would never do that." But after he saw it performed a few times, he's like, "You know what? That move's actually kind of cool." So I've got a little bit. We've got one of the fake outs right here. But what it reminded me of was Sword of Doom, when he would lower the sword and almost kind of space out and would bait people into attacking, whereupon he would fuck them up.
Now, this is something, as a kid already I was spoiled because I read a lot of manga and I watched tons of Japanese films. What the Japanese have over all Western cinema, the Chinese do too, but the Japanese, especially the storytelling, you would get a hierarchy in the boss battles. You wouldn't. This is very Western. He plows through that mansion of people, a little bit of an end boss here, but even that, he's not much of a challenge. Where in Japan, you would celebrate techniques. You would get the full moon cut that you described. And we see these things coming, and they will pay off later, that you have to then confront this sub-boss level with another technique that you have developed. So this is something where the Western eye, you can tell Sydney Pollack the way he's like going around with a cigar looking super cool. He's like, what if he does something super wild over here? And you're like, yeah, I don't know. So the Japanese had to deal with our simple understanding of this, where in the Japanese movie, this is handled a lot more tactical and more. And I picked that up so early, intuitively, that I was always a little bit let down, and I couldn't really articulate why I was let down, because we're used to all this martial arts stuff, Moose, like training, overcoming, going back, sub-boss, mid-boss, final boss. And you can subvert these expectations, but
well, like how when they first invade, he walks right through the room full of people and just executes the leader there.
Yeah, it's like,
and then everybody's real still, and you're like, oh shit, who's gonna make the first move? But everybody's very still, and I love how the camera just pans through and you see all those faces, like every one of those guys is just itching for a chance to take him down, and it's like this perfect tension you can cut with a knife. But Moose, I interrupted you. What were you about to say?
I don't remember.
Well, it's usually in those chivalry tales, it's also in Japan. of young men being very isolated, finding jobs out of the big cities, often having gone to mining towns. So these films became very, very powerful in these young salary men, and they're watching for male camaraderie that you could hold on to. And we're off to some horrible mining town in Hokkaido, but we can watch like one of these toy movies being played. So that theme would get played over, and it's very Riko Ikebe, usually, with Ken, he walks in Brutal Tales of Chivalry 2. They go through the one with the umbrella, the other one with the sword. They're getting ready, snow slowly coming down, which is exactly then mirrored in Rolling Thunder in 77. That's a direct homage to that, where they're like, I'll just go get my gear. I mean, it comes originally, originally comes from Hour of the Gun, but it's a Western, Eastern Western, as we often get these exchanges. But that kind of celebration of the last walk together towards this doom or this fate that we share, it's very important. It's drawn out in a Sergio Leone manner, and that's usually when we get the single that was sold with Ken that you could buy in the store the next day when you saw the premiere. That's when we get him singing, and we get a beautiful theater production. They cut this short here. If I was Sydney Pollack, I would have included a little bit of a walk with the two towards the mansion. But they're doing cool tactical stuff. They kind of cutting the bolt cutters, which I also appreciate. I also appreciate that. I want to see how things are done. It could have been even more, a little bit, another guy in a guardhouse that they have to deal with.
And Mitchum was no spring chicken when he made this. He was well into his 50s, decades of hard drinking and hard smoking. And they said it about killed him shooting those fight scenes. Because while Ken's off there, he looks like everybody, Mitchum is like crashing through walls with like shotguns and rifles and just like on the fucking warpath. But he really suffered through the shooting. But he's
also wearing fucking turtlenecks, army jacket, camel, cashmere the whole time. When he cuts his finger off, that sweat pouring down. You can just tell he's in full 70s knit tie where it's bigger than his head. And he's sort of having to run through with shotguns. And, movie sets back then, they were lit in the heat on those sets. And he sits at the end, but it lends to the movie. In weaker movies, they would have tried to like doing some crazy acrobatic shit. But over here, he's just there with Ken, and often you have the feeling he doesn't even hit anybody. He just blasts in some room. Who the fuck knows if he hits anything? And by the time Ken is done, he's sort of slumped against the wall, sitting there like this big bear. He's spent, but he fights to the last, using the butt of the gun to take everybody out. It's beautiful.
Sydney Pollack had this amazing way of describing their working relationship. He said, at this point, Robert Mitchum was so experienced and had so many incredible stories. But he's a little bit like an old stubborn horse, where he still had the strength and power to do everything you wanted him to do, but you had to beat him a little bit and kind of ride him hard to make him give. Like he said Mitchum had so much juice, but he wouldn't give it to you unless you kind of like wrestled with him a little bit. And you see it at the very end during the scene where he's removing the pinky with like the sweating and the halting when he delivers. But he made him do that scene like 11 or 12 times. And Mitch was like, "What do you want?" And he's like, "Give me the sizzle." Like, I know it's in there. And he had to really kind of beat him into submission. But goddamn, Mitchum, he gave us many fine performances. But when he slumps over after that and all his hair kind of falls over, it's like he still looks like the star of The Night of the Hunter. Like he's aged incredibly well in spite of the booze and the tobacco, which
and it's Ken's final. It's Ken's movie at this point, and Mitchum doesn't fall off, even though it's clearly Ken's finale, and that's a great star that none of the new people could pull this off, because the whole showdown is given to Ken. And this is supposed to, this is, Ken gets Black Rain, obviously. This is the Gaijin trilogy. So we have to shout out big time, of course, one of our famous, Sam Fuller, because Sam Fuller kind of initiates a lot of the Yakuza films. He starts. Because he does House of
Crimson
Bamboo,
Kimono or
House of Bamboo, 1955.
House of Bamboo.
Robert Ryan.
It was Crimson Kimono a few years later than House of Bamboo.
I forget who comes first, but it's the whole Nikatsu color code style that Seijun Suzuki loses later is in House of Bamboo. And the only problem with House of Bamboo, the only thing that's wrong with House of Bamboo, it's perfect, but Robert Ryan should have been the main lead, because he's the Oyabun, he's the gangster, he's the evil guy, but he was clearly the lead. But he blows everyone away. Robert Ryan in Tokyo in 55, like that bathtub scene when he shoots through. So that's kind of cool.
Every documentary ever made about Sam Fuller begins with that scene.
Yeah.
And just to kind of throw you into the deep end of the pool.
I did many side-by-sides because you were kind of marveling. You're like, some of this surreal Nikatsu style, the blue backdrop against the shoji doors. It's Sam Fuller. You're like, wow, this guy was really a true pioneer. And then we get the centerpiece, which is the Yakuza 74. And then we get 89. We get Black Rain, which is Ken's return. And we get all that. We get
and he's incredible.
Matsuda.
I saw Black Rain many times before I ever saw the Yakuza, and I was like, God, this guy fucking awesome. And the scene where Michael Douglas is basically allowed to claim any item from his dead friend by tradition, and he's like any item, and he nods and he gets the gun back, and now he's finally armed and ready to go to war. But yeah, that was my first exposure to Ken Takakura. But obviously I've got a long way to go, but I've also got yet another one of his movies here that you drew the cover for, Bullet Train, which I know Bullet Train's not regarded as one of his finest movies, but I just like having all this great Tony Stella art. I got all my Tony Stella Blu-rays right here with all your amazing covers.
The Abashiri Prison series came out too from Eureka. Those are really highly recommended. That was kind of his start to fame. These are prison movies. They did 17 of those. And it goes it does new prison. He never goes back to jail after that. He just leaves. But it's always called the Abashiri Prison series. But yeah, Ken in Black Rain, look what a master he is. He turns it. He's so soft and vulnerable. He's not.
And he was so popular.
They can trying to live up.
The movie. They said everywhere they went to shoot, like hordes of fans would show up. It's like, what's going on here? But the Japanese fans were just fanatics.
And of course, we get Yusaku Matsuda, who's the king of cool, forget Steve McQueen. And he died so early, and we get him in his last he does a turn. Because in Japan, he would usually play the hero roles, but he gets to do one of the most vicious killers of all time, the most charming. You're rooting for him. I mean, I want him to cut Andy Garcia's head off. Sorry, Bill Tech, but I want him to put that thing right off. So Black Rain, and then kind of end. It's interesting. 89 is the end of the Showa era. So everything comes to an end, and it kind of ends with Black Rain. And Ken goes on; he acts into the 2000s, and he dies in 2014. But he becomes so generous in his later career. I want to point out, people, you need to watch Station, which is a great movie, and The Yellow Handkerchief. Yellow Handkerchief.
What's the baseball movie? He's got some baseball movie. That's really popular.
With Tom Selleck. Forget that one. But it's good. I mean, Mr. Baseball. It's okay. Mr. Baseball. Yeah, it's cool. You can watch Ken in anything, but I'm saying you want to watch Yoji Hamada, 1977, The Yellow Handkerchief. You will cry tears. This is a famous movie in Japan. He's more beloved in Japan for The Yellow Handkerchief than many of the Yakuza films. Gotcha. This is when Ken takes a turn. He becomes a real actor. He does the Connery thing. He's like, okay, I could do this forever, but I'm breaking it open. I'm doing the offense. I'm taking some risks. And he becomes vulnerable as he gets older. And he never loses the cool. He can turn it on at any moment, but he does some heartbreaking films later on, and Japan loves him for that much more than later on, that he could go with the times and become somebody. You see how generous he is in Black Rain. He leaves it all for them. He doesn't have to be in the front.
All right, Moose, speaking of actors, I've got a hypothetical question for you. You're going to have to put on your actor hat and your screenwriter hat. But in the 1970s, Sydney Pollack made 6 movies. 4 of them were very successful. 2 of them are not. And the 4 movies that were successful had one thing in common. They all starred Robert Redford. And at one time, Robert Redford did express a little interest in the Yakuza. Wind the clock back. Hypothetical. What would have happened if Sydney Pollack and Robert Redford had made the Yakuza? Give us the pros and the cons if Robert Redford had stepped in. Because at that time, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, one of the most bankable actors, they were coming off The Way We Were, big tearjerker, kind of woman's movie in a lot of ways. But they were the unbeatable duo. They made Out of Africa later on. I think they made like 8 movies together. But what would have happened if Robert Redford, instead of Robert Mitchum, had stepped into these shoes?
No, it's interesting. You always have 2024. What do they call that when you
hindsight's 2020?
That's the one. But I can't see Robert. I'd love Robert Redford, anything he does, but I can't see. He doesn't have at that time. I feel like he's too young. He doesn't have that beat down, world weary kind of feel that Mitchum has in it. Lee Marvin could have that as well, but I think that
It's
Robert
called
brings everything.
It's called the pretty boy problem. Alain Delon suffered from that too. He wanted to be Bronson. He wanted desperately to be Bronson, but he couldn't. And
because he looked like a model.
dragged-
Yeah.
he was so handsome, and he boozed himself up. He took boxing, and you see it in Borsalino. You see it with Belmondo even. Belmondo fucking has it. Delon doesn't. And here goes the thing. You're loved and adored, and you do Le Samurai, and you're so cool as cool could be, but you don't have that last manliness, mandom. You don't have it. And those guys have it. So Mitchum could do it. And Redford, as he aged, we know, like you said, hindsight, we know what he became in age. He couldn't have done it as he grizzled because he didn't mature into that type of man that it carried that weight.
When you watch Jeremiah Johnson and you see him in that movie, it's like, the hair is like, he looks
beautiful.
like a goddamn angel, like that mop of blonde hair just swaying in the wind and everything. It's like he's so handsome. It kind of throws the whole movie off. It's like,
and it's a great movie. I love it, and those fights are convincing. But you need something else for the stoic man. You need to
believe somebody was a
That's why nobody.
in Japan, living there for years, and here he is, all these decades later with all this experience as a private investigator. And that, once again, combining film noir and the Yakuza genres together, Robert Redford does not have that film noir heritage that he's bringing to the table the same way Robert Mitchum does.
And Mitchum off camera is Robert Mitchum. That's how he walks around. That's the Yakuza. Same with Connery. You meet Connery that's Bond. There is no acting, and nobody could ever bring that Panther again to Bond. They do other versions. It's all nice and lovely. Your funny uncle. But they will never recast it. It's not doable.
I've told this story before, and I got to say it again. I don't know if I've ever told it on this channel, but I definitely told it on Wrong Reel. But my favorite story about Robert Mitchum, I don't know how old he was. He could have been young. He could have been old. Doesn't matter. But he's at a party, fucked up. And he disappeared into the kitchen for a little while. I'm like, where'd Robert Mitchum go? And at a certain point, he emerged from the kitchen, completely nude, covered in ketchup, and said, "I'm a hamburger." And I was like, all right, I want to party with that guy. But he liked to go at it really hard. But speaking of going at it hard, I drank way too much caffeine before this recording. I need a pee break. So I'm going to start the 2-minute pee break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about the legendary Bob Peak. Those are the groovy tunes of the Super Nintendo version of Shadowrun, which Moose and I are now playing in the second edition tabletop RPG. So all roads lead back to tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, man.
All right.
Moose and I were pop locking. You couldn't see us, but we're doing.
Oh, very nice. All right. Well, For people who don't know, Tony, over the last 10 years, not only did he do the Wrong Reel poster, he's done quite a few movie posters, quite a few posters for TV shows. I've seen his art in Times Square. I've seen your art at the Film Forum. And he's built up a pretty incredible body of work as an artist. But one of Tony's heroes is Bob Peak. And I managed to convert his movie poster for the Yakuza into a brief little clip, which I'm going to share here. So for everybody out there right now, we're about to have a special privilege because we're going to hear from Tony why this poster works.
Oh, thank you for that. First of all, I need those opportunities more and more as the computer's taking over, as these AI weirdos are being sponsored by whatever dark shadow thing to make us all some kind of weird Mao Zedong plan of getting rid of our traditions and culture. It's become so sinister that you kind of can't turn your eye away from it anymore. We are losing that what makes us most human, which is the ability to create art, to go into the forest and make a tree into a cembalo, to make music, and when the computer kind of takes over.
The Russos are doing it deliberately. They are hiring AI specialists on their movies and that sort of thing. Like you can see like an active role by the filmmakers in the erosion of film artistry.
Exactly. And this, what I always say, while it enrages me so much, or I get so passionate on in this private crusade, I think when I started on Wrong Reel, I was very positive about the future of movie posters. I sort of had a mini revival and people paying attention to, again, making specialty items. Where we arrived now is so dark and so disturbing that it's not only is it DEI hires and all this destructive ideological forces, but it's also kind of, Apple came out, they had to retract it right away. They came out with a new iPad commercial where it was a big compressor that squashes like a metronome, a sculpture, a piano, a guitar, and at the end it would squash it all into this digital iPad with a glass top, and everybody was so outraged because the message was so clear, it was so aggressive towards what makes us, again, like I say, most human, that we feel it now in the decline of cinema. The better the technology got, the more misunderstood it got what makes these films great. As we're talking about the Yakuza, the reason why we appreciate to the warmth, the colors, that DP, that's all ingrained in our deep humanity. We don't maybe not be able to articulate it all the time, but the same goes for pigment as it goes for celluloid. There's something that speaks to our inner soul. And when it's all digital, when it's like space battles, everything exploding, we sit in front of it, it leaves us completely cold.
Yeah,
that hand in hand, disposable, dead. It's created dead. It has no life because you haven't wrestled with it. And a charcoal is made from a burnt tree. Pigment comes from the earth. It connects us back into that. And look how sophisticated we were at the time that a major movie campaign would trust an artist to reinterpret that film to bring it to the public. The public was so sophisticated they could understand, oh, I see this translation, I appreciate it as another translation into an art form, from a script onto a movie, reinterpreted by the actors and now given to an artist and now viewed by the public who would then buy the tickets. That we completely lost because we're nanny stating them to death. The critique I hear most of the time why they don't want illustrated posters anymore, because people would think these are cartoons. So they need photographs to illustrate them. I mean, what a poor statement.
The absolute worst of the audience and then catering to this made-up audience in their mind that they assume they can only think in 10-second chunks, and they assume they have bad taste, and so they drive everything toward the lowest common denominator.
And we see those movie campaigns, and take any of these Marvel campaigns. Most of the great Marvel artists, you still have them alive. You could make incredible posters for them, and then we hear over and over these movie campaigns where they cost 300,000, 300 million for it's exploding budgets for I can't even fathom the numbers. Why wouldn't you like cut off 10 grand and give Bill Sienkiewicz one, or Mazzucchelli to do a Batman poster? Are you nuts? Are you crazy? And so we feel more and more this is on purpose, this is by design, and it's such a like you said, where do we hear that need and want back to it? If we hear it from the fans, we hear it from the audience.
Or Yakuzas for the budget of the Electric State.
Oh my God. It's depressing in a way. I'm now at this stage where I used to have a little niche where I could still create for these boutique labels that would at least do the classics with me.
Like this.
This was actually Matsuda was my passion project. That was a 10-year journey of me actually pitching this to various companies, bringing this to life.
And I think Moose and I both discovered it because of you. Moose, had you seen it?
Yeah, there was nobody talking about this before me.
I had no idea until you said, "Hey, Moose, I think I got something you'd like," and that's when I saw it and immediately got it.
People can see it, but there it's in focus.
Matsuda, I immediately got it and watched all three of them like the one night and just loved it.
Yeah. So that was there could be it's like it's even the super ivory tower boutique labels who've kind of have on their flag that they would preserve film culture are going full digital now, and they don't take care. They are starting to lose the art directors that could tell the difference. Like you said, to bring it back to the Yakuza from this kind of speech here, the little rant, is that you would get Bob Peak, who's an absolute master. He started out in the 60s in that golden age where he would do book covers and everything, but his first movie was kind of West Side Story, that iconic poster film. He did My Fair Lady, Apocalypse Now, and he wouldn't, again, do one style fits all. He would switch styles according to the movie, to the time period, to the thing. And these are, and we would have such a richness around, and I keep saying this is not the lack of amazing artists out there. It's really the willingness of the companies to trust the audience to even say, what does it hurt? Every country used to have a different poster. We used to get 2 posters within Germany, 4 posters in Italy. Such a richness created.
When you look at movies from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, like if you look at the French posters versus the Italian posters versus the Japanese posters or the Polish posters, they're all completely different styles and cool as shit in their own right. And it is just an absolute delight, especially for people who enjoy movie poster design.
But for us VHS kids of the 80s, how many times did we discover a movie because of the artwork? Not because of we heard about it. We're like, oh my God. And how many times did we get tricked because we thought this is some awesome barbarian movie, Boris Vallejo cover. Oh my God, this is some the Italian sandpit where they're rolling around. But I'm saying the importance. It has to be vocalized, and I've reached this point in my career where I'm at the height of my powers. I can sort of do everything I want, but there is no battlefield anymore. I will do it till I die because it's something I loved. I did it before, I do it without, but it's a shame that I found myself having to constantly make a point about this and be so aggressive about it because people are obviously forgetting about it, and we're unlearning so many things. And I feel the film culture in general is in the toilet. Could be all helped again if we refocus on the craft. If we would actually throw out some of the technology. I know that's absolute heresy because we're all indoctrinated with this thing. Progress is absolutely must be the best. But as we can learn from the Yakuza, it's not true. These are men out of their time, relics that live with a code of honor, a bridge they cannot cross, and they won't cross. And I will.
You are the Ken Tanaka Ken of movie poster design.
Yes, exactly. I will go down with my brush in hand. But yeah, Bob Peak, a super shout out for this one, and he's done many versions of it too. There's the US one is beautiful, and he's done an alternate one which is all in purple hues. Very cool too. And yeah, for a while ago, you could still buy those cheap. I saw them all the time popping up on various auction sites. Now they go for a bit higher, as they deserve. And I always hope till this day, and nobody has done it, we should have a movie poster museum where we have all this original artwork. I mean, George Lucas owns so much.
In New York, where I bought my copy of Sweet Smell of Success, and that was as far back as I could go before the prices became absolutely prohibitive.
Right.
But it was just like you'd have these trays that you would like slide in and out, and you'd pull them out. And I was just like, I wish I had $1 million, but maybe it's good that I don't, because it'll all go into these fucking posters. So I treated myself to at that. This was 2000 or 2001, but Sweet Smell Success at that time to get the original one sheet with I think $650. But I hope, fingers crossed, that it's gone up in value.
Oh yeah, they don't go down. But I mean the original paintings in the museum. Imagine like Madrid or the Prado or Louvre, but just the original
a very famous
of the Lost Ark.
Reached out to David Lambert recently and said, I want the original painting of your Warren Oates painting.
It's digital.
And David was like, it's digital. And I was like, dude, lie. And then just tell me you got it. But he didn't have the original. Moose, do you have any original movie posters hanging on your wall anywhere? I know you collect a lot of esoterica, but I didn't know if you have any great posters in your home.
You got five Venoms, yeah.
Yeah, I've got what I got. I got some my Drew Struzan, my Indiana Jones stuff, my Tony Stella, Hobo the High Kick. Got to have all the greats on the wall.
And when did you do the wardrobe change? I just noticed that you and I are wearing the same.
Yeah.
You weren't wearing that at the beginning.
2-minute pee break.
And we should also say Tony Stella designed that logo.
Yeah, and so now the only thing that's missing from this episode to make this circle whole is Bill Tech jumping off the top rope. Because for me, the introduction into Wrong Reel.
I could surprise Moose with Tony and then surprise Tony with Bill.
Oh my God!
I wasn't thinking. I get so anxious and nervous about everything that can go wrong, will go wrong, that I assume everything's just going to fall.
The giddy in the room would be too much, I feel.
Yeah, but we can totally make that happen.
But yeah, I mean, it's so cool you guys went out and actually did something together, because I feel what the Wrong Reel spirit was when we all initially met through you and you were so generous to have us all on, was that actually, yeah, it's nice to talk about movies, but can this actually mature into a friendship where you actually do projects together? Yeah. I mean, that was crazy and wild.
I worry at times that podcasting is so fun and so easy, or YouTube is so fun and so easy. It's been a massive talent drain away from independent filmmaking, because as Tarantino's pointed out, if we had podcasts and YouTube in the 90s, like half the independent filmmakers would have never become filmmakers. They just would have become commentators. And I'm like, commentary is all well and good, but eventually you got to actually put your foot out there and expose yourself and actually try to contribute something to film culture. So yeah, once again, Hobo with the High Kick. I
still hoping for David Lambert's scripted or directed Moose Western like that in the snow.
Even if we just did it as like an audio book with like a painting by Tony Stella to promote, that could also be cool. Like, because once again, it's like the moment you turn on the camera and start going to locations, the cost just explodes so quickly. Even if you're only
shooting. And who shoots amazing? I mean, the photos he has in his backyard are already enough. I can paint that. I can paint that all day. They're so cool. Yeah, and if we have this, that's definitely a great pitch. If a story that's narrated to go along, and Moose has done it already. He's kind of done this. He's pushed it very far. Unfortunately, we are all behind because we get such busy, crazy lives. But and you got a new addition to the family, Crom. I want to see him. Is he sleeping?
Otherwise known as Kane to some, but Crom to Moose.
Is he sleeping? Or
if you guys give me 60 seconds and
yes, bring him.
I can bring Crom.
Bring Crom on
for
the
audience.
Crom!
Yeah, I'm such a dog person. I know James is too.
I'm obsessed. Totally. Yeah, so anything else about Bob Peak while we wait for Crown to make an appearance?
Well, Bob Peak and his son is still around. He's released beautiful book. He's doing exhibitions. He's a great movie poster artist in his own right. He's done many of the Nightmare on Elm Street posters. So he pretty spectacular. And
especially the first movie has an absolutely dynamite poster.
Yeah, it's all his son. So Tom, I forget, but. And recently he's released kind of the last James Bond great art that was done was by Brian Basuth, but Bob Peak had some initial sketches of the Living Daylights, or was it License to Kill? Which is the
last Dalton was License to Kill. The first was Living Daylights.
So Living Daylights, there are some beautiful Bob Peak ones that he released as prints. So if you go on his website or Instagram, you can get those. Those are spectacular. Oh my God, there we go. There's the boy. Oh my God!
You just helped our engine optimization.
We need something for the ladies, you know. We can't just talk about Giddy or like that.
Now, how old is little Crom?
Get up, get your face.
Hey, buddy, what's happening? Big boy.
Oh my God!
He will be a big boy.
Yes. Oh, that was a special treat. Yeah, I feel like that's.
He's strong. When I die, I have to go before him. If I do not know the real Steel, he'll cast me out of Valhalla. That is Crom.
I was constantly thinking about this. If Arnold is watching his son Patrick now, you know, he's watching.
My God! We've all seen his penis now, thanks to the first episode.
No, but dude, what are you doing with the biceps? There's no definition. Come on.
Or the latest episode, spoiler alert, when he starts making out with his brother, I was like, you know what? I could have gone my whole life without watching Patrick Schwarzenegger make out with his brother, but
I just kept picturing Arnold trying to, okay, here we go. He's making, wait a minute, that's your brother. What are you doing? Is he crazy? It's like Arnold watching White Lotus is a skit that needs to happen. Well, who's that? Kyle Dunnigan. He needs to do it.
I love Kyle. He's hilarious. All right, so Moose,
Well,
we've been going an hour and 24 minutes. Y'all been incredibly generous with your time. But just as a way of kind of bringing us something closer to a safe landing, what do you want to talk about? What have we overlooked? What are we missing so far in our conversation? What have we not tackled?
Oh, let's see. As far in the movie,
the movie or any topic. Once again, I just I want to make sure that Moose has spoken his piece in this video.
I think we've covered just about everything, except, well, this movie also has a lot to. Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, what is this? What is the main point of this movie? Who's the main focus, or what's the main theme of it? And sometimes those change. There's the focus of those three people. Eiko and Tanaka Ken and Robert Mitchum, and then the idea of family comes in, and of loss, great loss, because you look at Tanaka Ken and Robert Mitchum, they're very much alike in some ways because they both feel like they don't have a family, but at the same time they have people that love them very much, that regard them very well, and so that's a loss in itself. That's terrible. But then
these three individuals have been living in solitude for so many years.
Yeah,
unnecessarily perhaps.
And then you bring these young people in. You've got Hanako, you've got Dusty, and they're young. And you see an evolution of Dusty's character where you're like, okay, this is a good guy.
Doing all the rituals and preparing the tea, and he's fascinated by all of it.
Oh yeah, you watch him change throughout the movie, and it's wonderful. And then
Keiko plays it so beautiful. Yeah, and Keiko plays it so beautiful. The way she sees her daughter, she's so proud of her. The way she does now, what she did for Mitch, all these years ago. It's magical because it's very sophisticated. Because they're in the house, it's like sort of jazz, and we're very lulled into a sense of security and family, a new family that could come from all this hurt and pain. Then it's ripped out right from under us, and it's really I don't know if we explicitly said, but Hanako dies. So and Dusty dies brutal with the sword. So
he gets skewered.
Yes, and it's you feel it like he's dying slowly on this. Like he feels it coming the end, and he's the one.
Pollack doesn't let you get off in the violence. He always makes you feel the violence.
Yeah, and just as he says, you know what, and then he's like, what? Oh, forget it. And he's longing. I could see myself getting onto this path, family. Settling down to, as we all, like, he makes us feel as the audience. We see this house and we're like, oh, I have no problem just hanging out here. And they're all such great friends and seeing life now. You feel you want, and this is what's so greatly achieved. You want all of them to arrive at this home. And the moments, they're so brief. When they're all together, it flows because she's making drinks for everybody. She's doctoring upstairs. She has the two men that she clearly loves. They're unresolved, but it's working in that moment for a brief second. And when him and Ken walk outside, that's when the drama happens. And that's a beautiful scene. Another great scene where they first open up together, where these actors are not, we maybe gave the impression that they're all stoic the whole time, but no, there's a moment.
And he's asking, have you made a lot of money? Has your career been okay? And they're just talking and bonding.
But and just how real men would. Because as he says, you know how it is. He doesn't explain real estate dealings or little things, and Ken just like, he totally accepts because he knows what it brings. None of this is easy. None of this life is easy that they're going to do. And the challenges ahead, he then all of a sudden says, you go and take her away, as he offered before, and then it's too late. You can't. That movie. And I feel, again, like we said, maybe these are problems that people perceive when they're at a different point in their life. But this is a movie you can return to, and it's very much due to, I don't know who it is, Schrader, original day, Leonard, everybody brings something to this. It's a true collaboration, like all true films get. And Pollack does have a lot of credit for holding that tension between these people and not letting it get off into, like he says at the beginning, a travel log. Let's go see Osaka. And you do have a little bit of that Shinkansen, like, I need to go back to Kyoto.
He's like, wait a second, I gotta go back to Kyoto. I gotta go back to
He's like, yeah. So, but he never lets us, like, you know,
I've been on that train. It's fast. When you go from Tokyo to Kyoto, when you're going by Fuji, it's like you don't blink because the train's going about 400 miles an hour, and it's just humming right along, but it's a great train ride.
But he doesn't focus on the palace once he's in Kyoto. He doesn't in Tokyo. It doesn't give us Tokyo Tower, or like in the challenge, he runs through the fish market, like awful stuff like that. Here, they stay away from all those temptations because Sydney Pollack is too smart. He says it in the featurette. He's like, it could be easy to just go off and forever meander. And
but he focuses. He says he's one of the great walkers that he spent weeks just walking from location to location, and any location he couldn't find that he needed, they built. But he says his production designer did the legwork and did an exhaustive.
And then left it. He very restrained with it because he needed to focus back in on the people. And he had enough people there that could give him what he wanted. And like in the case of Mitchum or even Ken, he had to coax him. They need somebody on the other end that has enough power, which Sydney Pollack clearly does, because you see him in the clip you play with the cigar and willing. So he's a cool dude. So, but he has a strength.
I'm always drawn to the directors with a strong visual style, whether that's Wells or Hitchcock or whomever. But with Pollack, he really shows me the value of a director who understands acting. And I always liked him more as a character actor, whether he's in The Player or Husbands and Wives or Eyes Wide Shut. But as a character actor, he was always so good. It's like, why is he so much better as a character actor? Because in the 80s and 90s, the kind of movies he was making are not necessarily the kind of movies that I'm really drawn to, like Out of Africa and things like that. But when you see an actor's director working on a genre film like Yakuza, that's where you really see the value of having a great actor who's also a filmmaker who can coax all these performances out of people.
Yeah, and that formula is deceptively simple, like pasta. You think it's simple to make, but you could fuck it up in 2 seconds if you don't pay attention. Like this, you could take the Angelica or wherever that was, at Tohei's Theater. I mean, what a luxury that these guys, Schrader and Leonard, they could actually go into LA and watch 10 Toei movies in a row. Like none of us had that luxury.
Yeah, there's no VHS, no DVDs. You had
nothing. I mean, still to this day,
Schrader talks about how the first time he saw Nosferatu was in 8mm projected on a sheet. It's like, if you wanted to watch old movies, you had to go well out of your way in the 60s in order to find these old classic movies, because once they were out of the theater, they were gone, never returned. Maybe they would show up on TV, chopped to a million pieces, but movies would vanish for all time.
But I mean, what a luxury. They said they would change the Toei Theater in Los Angeles. They would show 6 movies a week and then switch it back out. I mean, that's crazy. None of us had this because that would never get played on TV. So, of course, you get there. They have a little leg up because they're the movie nerds that are going to see all of this, and they can then distill this back into the West. But you feel what's kind of awesome is that they're very they're just fans, and I want to play with Ken too, and I want to use Ken and then clash him with Mitch like action figures and say we want to also make our own Yakuza movie. And of course at the time, let's talk Shogun, all this exoticism of the gaijin going and then being better than the Japanese and teaching them how to do everything, all that horse shit. They left that out because they knew once we get Ken, we need somebody to hold his weight, but that's all it is. We just need to show how cool the Japanese movie, all that history over there. Like we said, by the time the Yakuza comes out, the Japanese are done with it, and they shot, Ken alone shot 200 movies. So,
the productivity is intense, and how they in the 50s and 60s they made a lot of samurai movie, and it went straight into the Yakuza film because even the Japanese at a certain point maybe we've seen enough samurai movie. We're ready for something different. And
make no mistake, this is something that Schrader gets wrong in his film commenting. There's Yakuza silent movies. So this is not something that then springs up all of a sudden after they're done with Jidageki. No, there's always...
Sadly, a lot of Japanese silent movies have been... most silent movies have been lost, but it seems like the Japanese silent film in particular was very heavy, hit hard by deterioration or lack of preservation, and just sadly a lot of the 1920s Japanese movies don't survive, but they made a fuck ton of them.
Yeah, in the 40s and 50s, that's why I'm so impassioned about this. I always want labels to pick it up and distribute it. And we live in a good time for that. There's actually more than ever. But when I lived in Japan, I don't know whether you did that, Moose. I'm sure you did. I went to the video store all the time and just rented movies. I couldn't understand them, no subtitles, but I just binging, trying to get enough into it as I could. And I never even scratched the surface. Like,
here you go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said earlier that we got to Japan and my mom and dad got a VCR. She got it from their friend, and they gave us 10 videotapes. And the very first videotape, all of them had almost 3 movies on each. And the very first videotape had a movie on it called Spartan X. And of course, for everybody else in the know, it'd be Meals on Wheels. That was my introduction and what changed my life in a lot of ways to Jackie Chan. And so that was that. And I was like, well, I don't see those movies at the rental place on base. So I went out by myself and found this Japanese video rental place. And the guy didn't speak English. I didn't speak Japanese. And he's like, he filled out some form or whatever. And I'm like, thank you. And there's all these Jackie Chan movies, Sammo Hung movies, the Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Star movies. And I am just out of my mind. And none of them were in English. They're all in Chinese with Japanese subtitles. So I had no idea what was going on. But of course, as you're watching them, little by little.
For those lucky, you don't need that much. But the humor,
No.
But here's an interesting exchange. Ken is one of the few stars that's huge in China because of a movie he did called Manhunt. Great movie, too. And that was first, after the Cultural Revolution, one of the first movies that got widely distributed in China. It's kind of... forget about it. It's a long story, but he's big in Japan and in China. And Jackie, in reverse, is very one of the few Chinese stars that's huge in Japan, almost bigger than, it's still to this day. Like they translated huge into each other's culture at that time. And it's interesting because that obviously those countries drives me crazy when people mix it up all the time. But because even Schrader says what did he say? It's like something meets Bruce Lee when he described it. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is nothing to do with Kung Fu. And, they mix this up till this day. So Schrader had a...
Yeah, when people are watching a movie with Kendo and they talk about Kung Fu, I'm like...
it's driving me nuts. But
even
Schrader
does it. In the era, in the 2025, in the era of mixed martial arts, a lot of martial arts have blended together. But in the 70s, the styles were very distinctive, and karate was karate, kung fu was kung fu, and it's just, all the martial art forms, the disciplines were very specific, and it drives me crazy when people casually use one word to describe yet another discipline. And anyway, I studied Miyosim karate. It was called Taekwondo by my school, but it was actually Miyosim karate because my teacher left Korea when they were basically taking all the martial arts and blending them together into the national sport of Taekwondo. But he wanted to maintain the distinction or the originality of his style. And so, people take these styles and disciplines very, very seriously.
Now, I hope you got the next clip cued, which is Moose kicking the heavy bag in a spin kick in the 80s, like with parachute pants on. This is, I think, when I first started chatting with Moose, before I even introduced to you, Moose was like, we were chatting about Jackie or whatever. And then Moose was like, yo, check these videos out. And forget where it was, like outside the building. I'm in awe. I'm like, I'm the nerd watching all these movies. And
Moose, I don't know if you know this, but it's due to Tony that you and I know each other. Like you were very kind to come on a few of my live streams and watch and so on and so forth. But it was initially Tony who was like, you've got to get Moose on the channel. And you got to get Moose on your podcast talking about, I can't remember what our first topic was. And then Tony was, absolutely. We were talking about,
and Moose never mentioned it.
Yeah, and Tony was like, I can't believe Moose never mentioned that he's into martial arts. Anyway, so that was all before Hobo with the High Kick. And anyway,
Moose was the Ken. He was like Ken. I was like, I'm not gonna mention that I had all this life, and you're just talking about. I think it was Burt Reynolds and I forget.
Yeah, we talked about Smokey and the Bandit. We talked about. Is it Hooper or Hopper? I always get a mix.
Hooper.
We talked about Hooper, and what else did we talk about? But that was our first podcast.
Well, it was all about Hal Needham, really, and his movies. And
but you never mentioned once that you're a martial arts enthusiast, and then I started seeing
or stuntman. Like he's done all of this, extra movie. He's done that real life thing. That's why Mighty Moose is a legend. And I think.
Well, I was just saying. Go ahead.
No, I was just trying to piece back together how it initially happened, but I forgot how we all met. But it feels like
Yeah, I had never listened to a podcast before, and I came across Getting Medieval with Tony Stella.
Oh, was
Nice.
that the? Oh, nice.
Somebody mentioned, "Oh, you should listen to a podcast when you're at work at night." And
I had to
going,
break that
"Okay,
one
man."
into 2 parts. Tony was going berserk on that one.
I know. And
Want
so,
the entire
We were
Nibelungen
summarizing
retold.
the plot of Die Nibelungen, and it was in granular detail.
yeah. And so I,
Oh my God. Yeah, you have to learn how to do this. And then Siegfried goes over there and he puts on his other pants. And then Siegfried, oh my God, that was insane. Yeah, you have
Oh, it
to
was a
learn how to
whopper.
podcast.
Yeah, and I
So
can't
then,
remember
yeah,
how Tony and
yeah.
I first interacted, but his first episode was about movie poster design, and then from there we tackled like Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee and a bunch of other topics. But
Again, I didn't understand that podcast. You need to not talk about posters that nobody can see. I was like, as you see over here, Bruce Lee is kicking somebody out the Coliseum. So it was very visual. My first podcast.
well, now that you've come on my YouTube channel, we can talk about movie posters. And what I would like, if we could have a video at some point where I could fit, I just need to figure out how to do it, where I could have the poster displayed in its entirety, like on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can just walk us through what's going down and what makes those posters your personal favorites.
Oh, that'd be cool. Top 10 stuff. That's easy. And we could have the movies to jump off. Yeah, but yes, thanks you guys. I didn't want to crash your episode in any sort of rude way and not let you talk as I do ball over people. But I found I couldn't resist. That was too great an opportunity.
I reached out to you just hoping for a question that I could either play or read. So the fact you wanted to come on and hang out with Moose, that made my day.
And one day we have to meet in person. But yeah, I let's see where our paths take us.
That'll be during that cowboy movie that we make.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Well, let's make it happen. All right. Well, Moose, in the interim, in the short term, where can people find your work with Savage Films Monthly? Where can people find your YouTube channel? Now's the time to plug and promote all your various ongoing projects.
Well, my YouTube channel, Moose Matson, that's easy enough to find right there. And Savage Drums Monthly, you can find that on, you look up Savage Drums Monthly online. We are on Amazon, you can in paperback, Kindle, and my audiobook versions. And
what about Hitting the Brakes, Moose and Bill?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about doing another one of those the other day. But Bill Scurry, again, these are the people that I have met through you, like Bill Scurry. And one day I'm like, hey, Bill, what do you think about this? And he filmed it. And next thing you know, I'm putting out Hitting the Brakes with Moose and Bill.
Well, nothing gives me greater pleasure than when I see people who have met through the podcast collaborating and doing their own projects, like when Rob Cotto and Bill Tech end up working together on the Stevie Van Zandt documentary, but they met when they were recording a podcast about the Blues Brothers. And I'm like, that's pretty fucking cool. Just like whatever degrees of separation. But Tony, where can people find your website and order some lovely, lovely prints and keep the art of movie poster design alive for another generation? Because what I want to see in like 5 or 10 years time is you have like 3 or 4 disciples, almost like the kendo hall where Ken is teaching kendo. I want to see your disciples sitting around you, gazing at you in awe and wonder, trying to learn the skills from the master.
I'm a lone wolf. I will never. My wife always tried to press me into getting an assistant because I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, no, then I don't want to go to work anymore. There's somebody there. I need to be alone. But what's really a cool development, all this depressing kind of downturn of movies and culture and all of a sudden that we're experiencing, that I finally found a publisher that works with me. And sort of the saving grace has been during the last year that a lot of Sergio Leone has been released, that amazing book. And Sir Christopher Frayling, one of my absolute heroes, has decided to not use one of the million amazing photos he had available of Sergio Leone in his archive, but actually decided that, why couldn't we have a painting?
Bring it for show and tell so people can look it up and buy it. Wow.
Yeah, and so that's been an absolute kind of knighthood for me, that not only get to work for something official for Sergio Leone, but Christopher Frayling is like one of the absolute scholars that got me into loving movies in the first place. So the fact that that's now a real object out there in the world is absolutely like mind-blowing. And yeah, sometimes you get to have these little moments that you hang on to that carries you over. I hope there's another one coming that I can't reveal, but so publishing takes forever.
Dog, I get to show off my Tony Stella memorabilia.
Yeah, look at that Hummer. Look at the side. Like it's absolutely spectacular book. Like, and the fact they could have really had just any old thing on there, and the fact that they went for a painting, I give them so much props because they didn't have to. And we're already on the next one that I can't quite reveal, but it's even. Can you imagine? It's even more of a favorite topic than Sergio Leone. So that next one's coming.
I wasn't even aware that there was a more favorite topic. It's either gonna be Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan, or
no. Even,
it's gonna be Tatsuya Nakadai.
No, but none of these. But yeah, you won't guess. But it's awesome, and it's also by Sir Christopher Frayling. So I'm completely honored.
Is it Kurosawa?
Nothing Japanese. Nothing Japanese.
Well, one day when you're coming back on the channel, what I'll have to do is I'll have to bring down all the posters that I have framed on my wall, and we'll do a little show and tell, and you can talk about your craft and technique. Because once again, it's like, I know you're the lone wolf, but there are impressionable young people out there who might be like, I can't stand all this digital stuff, but when they see some of your work, they might be inspired to create some of the work of their own. I mean, pass that baton.
It's still, you meet the coolest people ever. So much praise every day that I'm humbled every day that so many cool people react and collect and support. So I can't be too negative about that. It's just
especially when I see filmmakers and showrunners on pretty big shows getting very excited about your work and shit. When I see like Guillermo del Toro or Terry Matalas or James Mangold or whomever, but like a lot of filmmakers kind of drooling and salivating over Tony Stella art, I'm like,
yeah, recently I looked up the guy who won the Oscar. I was like, who's that? Never heard of him, Sean Baker. And I look up on X, he's been following me. And I'm like, oh, sorry. Now it feels weird if I follow you back because
he's retweeted a million episodes of Wrong Reel. Sean Baker is a real deal film fanatic.
Nice.
He loves Russ Meyer. He loves movie posters, but there's a Twitter feed for a while where every month they have a different filmmaker come in and share posters that they like. All of his posters were Russ Meyer. I was like, you know what? Your films are a little more art house, but if you like Russ Meyer, you're one of us. So.
Well, yeah. What's exactly? Let's ask the question back to you. Isn't there some Russ Meyer anniversary coming up?
Oh, there's a Super Vixen's 50th anniversary coming up. It's funny. I have so many friends that are rabid film lovers. I always get the sense that nobody likes Russ Meyer quite as much as I do. So I think I'm going to fly solo on the Super Vixen's.
Nobody is as virile as you.
But if I could find
your stamina.
If I could find somebody who loves Russ Meyer with the same intensity, I would gladly have him on to discuss Super Vixens with me. But I always feel like because his movies deal with, curvaceous women, that he's frowned upon. But I fucking love Super Vixens.
But isn't that great to bring it back? Because I was feeling you're Dusty and Moose and I are definitely Mitch and Ken. We're like, I'm too old. Because at one time when Keiko kisses him, he's like, he turns around, he's facing the bar.
God damn it. Too old for this shit.
Well, to quote Gus McRae from Lonesome Dove, the older the violin, the sweeter the music. So I know people get really angry with me sometimes about talking about sex too much on the channel. And I'm just like, sex appeal is part of movies. Like, everybody just chill the fuck out. Like, yeah, here's a recent quote I got. James Hancock, stop talking about how horny you are in every fucking movie review. Praying we see you on the news one day getting arrested for the sex crimes you probably commit. I was like, wow, you've gone from not liking my commentary to accusing me of crime. But you know what?
Wow.
For me, movies are about, and often more often than not, about sex and violence. One brings you into the world, and one takes you out of it. I make no apologies for being interested in both sex and violence in cinema. They will always be part of cinema.
Yeah, and I find it authentic coming from you. You chose that complete life. You're still out there. I'm polishing my sword alone. See.
Well, on that, we're not going to find a better note to end this on. To be continued with future videos, because I threw out an idea for Tony about another possible 50th anniversary, a big one that's coming up later on this year. And I think Tony at a minimum bit on the hook. Now I gotta reel him in.
Oh yeah, and Moose can come on too. This is a cool one. We can discuss after. This is a buddy one. So
well, also everybody who's ever been on Wrong Reel, everybody that I interact with on social media, they're always invited on the channel. Like, I mean, it takes a little bit more work to get these things organized, but they're so much fucking fun once I finally do them. And I might as well go ahead and plug the next video that I post. Jeremy Workman, editor Paul Murphy, and Bill Scurry came on to talk about the documentary Secret Mall Apartment. And so just so happens that in this week, I've got 2 videos where I'm interacting with my friends. So I just need to give myself a kick in the ass and just invite more people on the channel because it's so much fun when I do it.
And the first reaction I got was like, "Oh, I miss Wrong Reel," and it's the way of directing people over to the channel. It's like it's still happening. It's still happening. It's just over on YouTube now.
Yeah. Also, because I mean, we're talking about movies. It's fun to be able to show clips, and with audio, while it's fun to play with the music and that sort of thing, if we're talking about movies, I just find it useful if I can show clips and that sort of thing. So yeah, Wrong Reel will live forever within my YouTube channel. But on that note, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Hunt down some issues of Savage Realms Monthly in audio format, and definitely hunt down some prints by the great Tony Stella and help keep his art form alive and well. But if you enjoyed this conversation, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upward.
Ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.